By the time I arrived, the dining table was already crowded with color. Boxes layered in metallic paper. Ribbons curled like confetti that hadn't yet fallen. Someone had lit candles even though it was still afternoon, their faint vanilla scent mixing with the heavier smell of baked pasta. I paused at the doorway longer than necessary. Not because I was late. I wasn't. But because there's a moment when you enter a room and immediately understand your position inside it. Not logically. Not dramatically. Just a quiet awareness, like noticing the temperature change when you step indoors. Vi spotted me first. "There you are," she said brightly, the kind of brightness that performs warmth rather than offering it. "We were starting to think you forgot." I smiled, slipped off my shoes, and joined the cluster of bodies orbiting the table. The gathering was technically for Mara's promotion, though these things always blurred into group celebrations, birthdays folded into career milestones, housewarmings disguised as dinners. The gift ritual was predictable. Everyone brings something small, symbolic, proof of attention. I had brought something once. A plant that sat unwatered in Mara's kitchen until the soil cracked. Since then, I learned observation was safer than effort. Still, today felt different. Not worse. Just familiar in advance. They began passing the gifts around with playful ceremony. Mara opened each one while narrating her gratitude in escalating tones: candles, a silk scarf, a framed print, a cookbook she already owned but pretended not to. Laughter filled the spaces between wrapping paper tears. I clapped when appropriate. Commented when expected. At some point, I noticed the stack shrinking. Then gone. Mara brushed tissue paper off her lap and looked around, satisfied. "That's everyone, right?" Vi's eyes moved across the room like a spotlight grazing faces until they reached me. There was a flicker. Quick. Almost invisible. Then she laughed. "Oh my God," she said, hand covering her mouth as if suppressing something delightful. "We must have misplaced yours." A few people chuckled automatically. Someone added, "Check the hallway table." But no one actually moved. The joke hovered there, plausible deniability wrapped around something sharper. I felt the familiar sequence begin inside me. First, the inventory: did I misunderstand the occasion? Was participation optional? Did I forget some message thread? Then, the defense: it's not intentional. It's logistics. Oversight. People are busy. Then, the quieter truth underneath both. You are the easiest person to forget. Vi tilted her head. "We'll find it," she said, tone light but already drifting elsewhere. The room resumed motion. Conversation restarted. But something had shifted, like a glass placed slightly off-center on a table. For a moment, I considered the usual response. Smile. Wave it off. Say, "Don't worry about it." Become small enough for the moment to pass cleanly. Instead, I noticed my hands resting calmly in my lap. No shaking. No heat rising behind my eyes. Just a strange stillness, like standing at the edge of a pool before deciding whether to jump. I thought about other gatherings. The times I brought extra food because portions ran short. The rides given without reimbursement. The projects at work where my name appeared last despite starting first. None of it catastrophic. All of it cumulative. I realized, sitting there among ribbon scraps, that exclusion rarely announces itself loudly. It accumulates through soft permissions. Vi was already telling a story to someone else when I stood. "Makes sense," I said, gentle enough that only nearby people turned. "That it got misplaced." She blinked, recalibrating to my presence. "I figured it might," I continued. Mara looked up, confused but attentive. I reached into my bag. "That's okay," I said. "Here's what I got myself." The object wasn't large. No dramatic reveal. Just a slim folder and a small brass key attached to a plain ring. For a second, no one reacted, not because it lacked significance, but because meaning hadn't yet landed. Mara smiled politely. "Oh." I set the folder on the table where the gifts had been. Inside was a lease agreement. Not decorative. Not symbolic. Signed. Stamped. A quiet document marking the studio space I had secured across town, the one I'd mentioned wanting for years but never pursued because something else always required my time, money, flexibility. The key rested on top like punctuation. "I signed this morning," I said. Silence expanded, filling corners conversation had occupied minutes before. Vi frowned slightly. "A studio?" I nodded. "For the consultancy," I said. "And workshops." Mara leaned forward, scanning the document without touching it. "That's soon," she said. "It is." Across the table, Daniel straightened. "You're leaving the shared office?" There it was. The external consequence. Not dramatic. Not hostile. Just logistical gravity. "I am," I said. The shared office had been Mara's idea years ago, collaborative, communal, efficient. It also meant my work existed inside her infrastructure, her schedule, her client flow. Convenient for everyone. Limiting in ways I hadn't articulated. "When?" Daniel asked. "Next week." The room absorbed that. Vi crossed her arms, the humor gone from her posture. "You didn't mention this." I met her gaze. "I've mentioned wanting space," I said softly. Mara closed the folder. "Well," she said after a moment, voice measured, "that's a big step." It wasn't approval. But it wasn't dismissal either. Just recognition. Conversation didn't resume immediately. People looked at the key, then at me, as if aligning two versions of the same person. The one who filled gaps. And the one who created exits. Daniel cleared his throat. "We'll need to adjust scheduling." Mara nodded slowly. Practicalities began forming: calendar shifts, resource redistribution, client notifications. Not confrontation. Reorganization. I felt something unexpected then. Not triumph. Not vindication. Relief. Like setting down a bag you didn't realize you'd been carrying. Vi eventually smiled again, though differently this time. "Well," she said, "congratulations." It sounded genuine and unsettled at once. "Thank you." The gathering continued, but its rhythm had altered. People asked questions: rent, location, plans. Mara refilled glasses with absent focus. Vi laughed less loudly. Later, in smaller pockets of conversation, a few approached me quietly. "That's exciting. You'll do great. I didn't know you were that far along." I accepted each comment without translation. No resentment. No overinterpretation. Just information about proximity and distance. As evening thinned and coats appeared, Mara walked me to the door. "I hope you didn't feel," she started, then paused. I saved her from finishing. "It's okay," I said. And for once, it wasn't avoidance. Outside, the air was cool enough to sharpen thought. I slipped the key into my pocket and started toward the bus stop. Behind me, laughter filtered through the door before it closed. I didn't feel excluded. I felt separate. There's a difference. On the ride home, I turned the key over in my palm. Metal warmed by skin. Proof of something simple, access granted by my own decision. I thought about the moment Vi laughed. How they expected silence. How silence had been my most consistent contribution. The bus slowed at my stop. I stepped off, the streetlights humming faintly overhead. Tomorrow, there would be logistics. Packing. Emails. Uncertainty. But tonight, there was only the quiet understanding that belonging offered by others can disappear without warning. Self-placement rarely does. The gift hadn't been the lease. Or the key. It was the interruption of a pattern. And as I walked the remaining blocks home, hands in my pockets, I realized I wasn't replaying the room's reaction. I was imagining the studio's empty floor. Waiting. Not for permission. Just arrival.